Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started? And what are they doing to stay there? And oh my goodness, are you in for a treat today as I'm bringing you another special guest? As today, I'm getting to talk with Sterling Edwards. Sterling is the lead pastor at Lakeshore Baptist Church in Lake Dallas, Texas, my home church. He's also the author of multiple books. Some of those include Sentiments and Stories of a Struggler and a Savior, Unbecoming, Jesus Can, Hope is a Person. So he does a lot of writing. And he's also has a passion for, well, of course, his family and church planning as well. Sterling, it's so good to have you on the show. How you doing?
Good, Bruce. Good, Bruce. Thanks for having me. Really glad to be here and excited. Love all your leadership and the encouragement you are to other people in our church and our community. And I know well beyond that. So it's really great to be here with you today.
Well, I'm glad to have you on the show. And I've admired you since the first day you came into Lakeshore. I always like to reflect to start my show. Like that first time that we met, or when I met my guests, or maybe when they came into my path. And for you, I remember when you came in, I was at the very first service that you did, and then later we went out for coffee and we had a really good conversation. Do you remember
I
that?
remember that. I do remember that. Yeah, over there at Liberation and Lake Dallas. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
absolutely. Yeah,
Liberation. That
yeah,
was it. I
yeah.
love that, and I've been watching your journey since, and I admire everything that you're doing, and we're going to get into some of that. Hey, before we get started, though, I would love to ask you if you would share just a brief highlight of Lakeshore Baptist Church and maybe something that the listeners don't know about Lakeshore.
Yeah, I mean, Lakeshore has such a rich history here in our community, and it's really been a joy for me not only to be the pastor of the church, but to really understand some of what's transpired before ever became the pastor here. That Lakeshore has produced, in some ways, I guess, some great leaders and pastors have come out of Lakeshore. Actually, just this past week, Steve Gaines, who a lot of people would know in a lot of church circles, he was pastor at Bellevue Baptist Church in Memphis. And he was president of the Southern Baptist Convention, had a lot of national notoriety. What a lot of people don't know is that he was the pastor of Lakeshore
Hmm.
for 5 years. A big part of the legacy of getting part of this building built, and that we have here. And so, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of notoriety, that goes with that, and it's just been really, really great to just kind of put some of that together and to just kind of see the people that have gone before. Before I was, I was ever, here. There was same story, same gospel. It was, same message being preached, and so, it's humbling in that way to just kind of be a part of that.
And I'll put the link in the show notes. If the listeners want to learn more about Lakeshore, you can click on that link. I want to dive into this. I want to hear, like, I know you, Sterling, but there's probably a lot of things I don't know about you. I would love to hear the Sterling Edwards story. Like, where did you grow up? And
Sure.
how in the world did you get into ministry and leadership?
Grew up in Houston, Texas.
Oh,
Born and raised in Houston, Texas. And my dad was a pastor.
mm,
My dad started pastoring his first church, a little church in Houston, called Roslyn Baptist Church. He was 20 years old when he became pastor of that
wow.
church. And so, I kind of grew up in a church family. My mom's father, my grandfather, was also a pastor. And so, I kind of came some of that naturally. It doesn't always, mean that because you grew up in that way that automatically forms your legacy of what you're going to be, I guess. But I did grow up in that setting. I ended up graduating from high school and eventually met Jenna, my wife, in college and came to Dallas Baptist University. And then
Mm.
I interned at a church in Plano. This is kind of my first go around with DFW, if you want to, put it that way. And then was a student minister at some churches in Texas Panhandle, and then Houston. And then a big part of our story, as you know, is we moved to New York to plant churches. And New York's a big part of our story. We were in New York for 13 years on Long Island and in Brooklyn. And then that's really where I got maybe involved or really passionate about church planning, led church planting in Phoenix. And then we came here to Lake Dallas almost 3 years. It's really it's 2.5 years ago. I mean, our 3 year anniversary is not that far away, which is remarkable how fast it's gone by. But we got 4 daughters that are 27, 22, 17, and 9. We were living in Brooklyn. We had a little surprise when we were 43, and she's still our surprise. So,
I love it.
yeah,
I mean, there is a
yeah,
lot here. There is a lot here. First of all, Texas and New York, two different cultures. Two different cultures. What was that? What was that like going? Like, I'm sure, like, you talked about your father being 20 years old. I'm sure that
right,
was, I can't even imagine 20 years old. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to go lead a community of people. And now here you are, you're going all the way to New York. What was that
yeah.
like?
You know what? I wrote this, and I've written stuff that a lot of what I write is just my own reflection. It's just
Yeah.
me kind of thinking things through. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to kind of figure out some of that stuff. But I wrote this thing a while back called "What I Learned in the Town of Panhandle, Texas, that prepared me for New York." And Panhandle is like the town of Panhandle is like 30 miles northeast of Amarillo, like 2,200 people in the entire town. And you would think it's like the greatest contrast in the world, to go to New York City. But the thing is, if you're not from Panhandle,
Mm,
I mean, when I not from Panhandle, if you're not born in Panhandle,
mm.
you're always an outsider. You could live in Panhandle for 40 years, and they're like, yeah, but you weren't born here. And there's like some of that, like, how do you like even go into a small town and become one of them? How do you become
Yeah.
like somebody who, and so New York, the tendency would be that you're going in there and, we're going in there with an actual reason to do,
Mm,
we want to see churches planted. We want to see people come to know Jesus.
yeah.
But we also went there and we began to learn that in order to, reach New Yorkers or to like even connect with New Yorkers, there's a sense of how do you like live as a New Yorker, not trying to get them to conform to, well, this is how we do it in Texas, but to understand like what are some of those things that we can be able to just really just to love where we live. What is it that we love? And we saw that happen where we went from being, the very first, I love to tell this story. We first time we'd lived there for about a week, and Jenna, we went to order a pizza, went to the local pizzeria, and Jenna says, "Do y'all have just plain cheese pizza?" And the guy, like without skipping one beat, he goes, "First of all, we don't say y'all. And secondly, it's called a regular." And Jenna is like, I mean, Jenna has never said y'all since that day. I mean, no matter like she
So
just
good.
and you go, okay, we stand up. Our y'all, our mannerisms, those things they kind of stand out. And you're not trying to be something that you're not. You just
Yeah.
begin to just like appreciate where you are, and you can do it in Panhandle, and you can do it
Mm,
in New York, and we
mm,
began to just kind of, we just love, we still love it.
yeah.
We're you know this because you do hear me, preach every week. But like, we love where we live,
Yeah.
but we appreciate New York for what it is,
Yeah.
and
So,
we love the people there.
so good. I wrote a book years ago called Find Your Lane. Change your
Yeah.
GPS and change your career. And that's really all about, there's lots of different ways to walk, this journey to have success. You just got to figure out like what works for you. You got to find your lane, your calling. I'm curious, okay, here you are. You said, hey, I'm gonna in Dallas Baptist, you're going into ministry. But there's got to be a time, it seems to me, high performers just seem like there were these moments. Sometimes there's a moment when it
Mhm.
validated, like, hey, this is what I want to do because I just know I was born to do this. Was
Yeah.
there a moment when you like found your lane?
Yes.
Cool.
I think that is such a I mean, I love how you started the podcast with just like you like to reflect.
Mhm.
Man, I for sure do. I do a lot of reflecting of like, how did I get, from here to there? How do you go
Yeah.
from Panhandle? How do you go from living in Plano to the town of Panhandle to to Brooklyn. I think about it a lot. Um, yeah, I remember specifically coming to a place of not discontent, and that's not really the right word,
Mm-hmm.
but I do remember coming to a place of determining, I guess, that I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to sit on the sidelines. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to wait for some of the things that where I was just going to kind of cross my fingers and hope some things happen. I was willing to maybe like make a determined effort to do that. To like one specific moment, I remember January 2006, 20 years ago. Man,
Mm-hmm.
you think about that 20 years ago. I was at Bridgestone Arena in Nashville and with a group of college students, and Louis Giglio, who's led college students, he's pastor at Passion City Church. He's talking to maybe 20,000 college students, and he's telling them, he said, it's amazing that Baylor University has 100 different kind of Christian clubs, and that's so good for Baylor. But he says, but have you considered the fact that Columbia has zero Christian clubs, or that NYU has zero? He says we need some of you who are at Baylor and Waco to make the move, to New York City. Well, I'd never even been to New York City at this point. Not only not church plant, I'd never even been in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I remember coming home and telling my wife, like, if I was in college, if I was a college student, would I would make that move. And I'm telling you, Bruce, 1 week to the day, a friend of mine called me, and he out of nowhere, and he just said, "Hey, have you ever thought about starting a church in New York?" And I remember just like beginning to like understand that none of these things
Mm-hmm.
are coincidence. This is God working
Mm-hmm.
and kind of leading me. But not just like you're saying. And I love what you're talking about with the location. It's not really the location. It's like really what he stirred inside of me, like
Mm-hmm.
where I just began to go, man, I'm gonna go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot more to that, in terms and I mean, about the leadership. There's a lot more to that in terms of leadership where you're willing to go without you're off the map. You've never
Mm-hmm.
been here before. I don't know what this is supposed to look like. Leading churches, you're trying to lead a church to go to a place that they haven't been. Like there's got to be like a vision, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
whole other thing. But you start to just kind of go, what's driving me, and yeah, I mean, I just began to just kind of believe that there was more than sitting on the sidelines and hoping maybe something comes to me, like let's go.
Mm. I love all of
Yeah,
this. I circled a word you said here. You were determined.
yeah.
And have you always been determined? Is that just
Mm,
part of you, or is that like, did that come from, maybe you saw some different people in your life that you're like, hey, I like what they're doing. You mentioned the guy in
mhm.
Nashville. I'm
Yeah,
determined to be that too.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's something that I've stepped into just to understand the value of,
Mm,
grit, resolve,
yeah.
that level. That I think that's probably what I appreciate most
Mm,
in the leaders that I'm around. One of my friends who's probably had a great influence on me in Phoenix. His name's Brian Bowman. He pastors a church there, and he and I became very good friends. Uh, he really demonstrates for me like grit, determination.
mm,
Who in your who's waking up thinking about what it is that you're passionate about? Like who else is
mm,
doing it? Let's take the middle school. Like, man, I really want to see us connect with middle school and high school students. Who's waking up? I mean, we got the middle school right across the street from us. Who's waking up thinking about what's going on with middle school students? How do
yeah.
we connect with them? How do we encourage them? And so that to me, that's like determination. Like, man, I'm gonna keep following after this. And
Mm,
there's different people where I've seen that for sure. Like you're talking about, definitely modeled,
yeah.
and I love it. But yeah, there's a fire. Yeah, maybe that's another metaphor. There's a fire in me
Yeah. I love that.
that yeah, that drives me pretty hard.
Yeah. That's
It
so
is
good.
what gets me up.
That is so good. I love that. Well, I want to jump into a little bit of leadership here, and we have a large business community here, and a lot of the things that you're doing applies to leaders in the workplace as well. But I'm just curious, like, here you are, you come to Lakeshore. First of all, I would love it. And I gave you a few questions ahead of time, but
Yeah,
there's some questions I just now are coming to my
yeah.
mind that I'm sitting here thinking, a lot of times when you go to a new church and all of a sudden now there's just a lot of there's change ahead. There are a lot of things to do. Can you kind of go back to like, hey, what was it I saw that attracted me here. And then I got here. What was the focus then and what's the focus today as a leader in the church? I'm curious.
When I came to Lakeshore, I really came in pretty wide-eyed and determined. There's the word again, determined,
Mm-hmm.
that was gonna learn the people. Now,
Mm-hmm.
and when I say learn the people, I mean like I'm gonna love the people, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna learn. Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, this is like I got to get like a full scope of the lay of the land, if you want to,
Mm-hmm.
look at it that way. Like right now in baseball, every team is thinks they're going to win the World Series right now because every team is 0-0,
I
and
love
you
it.
everybody has like amazing optimism, and you're like, it's perfect. Well, like what you there's nothing wrong. We got
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And so the same thing is true. You get
Mm.
you get a little bit of a honeymoon period. You
Yep.
go to a new church and they're excited. Okay, and here at Lakeshore, I'm following a pastor who was here for 34 years,
Mm-hmm.
faithful man of God who, was diligent. I mean, that's some of the hardest leaders to follow,
Sure.
is somebody who's got a proven track record that not only people love, but they're very much used to it.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
we understand. Then you got a different voice. Then you got a different voice. You got a different approach. You've got a different, I have my eye on something else, and I've kind of got my own stirring for that. So I came in, and for sure, like, the church is wonderful, and then you start to go, we're wonderful, but let's just say you've made the determination, this is good, this is wonderful, but I want to take the church here, and wherever that is on the map,
Yep.
I want the church to go over here in this direction. I think that if we go over here, then the church is going to be more successful. If you want to look at it that way, the church is going to be more vibrant. The church is going to have more influence. The church is going to, function in these ways. And so it doesn't really matter, like, in some ways, where over there is. It's just not where it was. And so that's the tension that goes on, where you're trying to lead people to go just in a different direction. And
Yeah.
that's where you feel a little bit of the tension. And then, there is that everybody liked the honeymoon way better, including the pastor. Pastor likes the honeymoon better too.
Uh,
Yeah. Oh man, it was all good. You can't do anything wrong. And you want us to go where? You want us to do what? You're aware, we changed some of the time slots, and that it you wouldn't think it would make that big of a difference, but depends on who you are, it makes a big difference. And it's just because it's not what it
So
was.
good. I love that. And you use the word vision. And I think
Yes.
that's one thing I've been impressed is that you've had this great vision, this 276 campaign,
Yeah.
and just some of the different things you've done. I feel like businesses that do well, churches that do well, services that do well, they all have this thing in common. That is, people can see it. Like they can see the mission. They want to go on the mission. They can see the vision. In your particular case, you've done a great job. I remember early on how this was different. You got the whiteboard out
Right.
during the service. I'm like,
Right.
what's happening here? He is
Right.
teaching. And he's not just teaching, he's showing people the vision. Like, is that
Yeah.
just something that's been part of you? Did you learn that? I read one time where John Maxwell used to, when he was a pastor at a very small church, he used to pay these pastors to have a, 1 hour, meeting with them so we could go
Right.
learn from them. And I'm sure
Right.
you've done that as well. But like, where did that come from?
Well, there's some of it is calculated,
Hmm.
just exactly what you're saying. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna illustrate. I know you hear me every week. I know you're used to hearing me every week. Now I'm gonna show it to you a
Let
little
me
bit
show
differently.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Been good.
and part of that is to illustrate it, where even like you just even saying it means you remember that day
Oh,
that we
yeah.
pulled it out, and
Yeah.
so you're looking at it from that standpoint. Part of that is also, one of the things in church, and I know in other businesses, when you're talking about a vision, it's conceptual, but it's invisible. What do
Hmm.
you mean? You're trying to like paint a picture.
Hmm.
uh this is what our preferred future is. This is where we're wanting to go. And so, for the person who's been used to the business model, or this is how church is, and then you're talking about something that's outside of that, you're talking about something that becomes almost, um, it's some of it's hard for people to wrap their minds around it. And so, when we started the 276 campaign that you're referring to, uh, there's it's just most of it is just another
Hmm.
way of saying what it is that we're doing. We're just really trying to illustrate, but this is where we're going with it. And that's where yeah, you're trying to paint that picture.
I love it because so at the Armstrong Company where I work, we call it our DNA elements. This is what we're focused on. That it's the values, the organization. I've got a card right here for those that are
Yeah,
listening right
there you
now.
go.
If you just come on over here, and I
Yeah,
I love this card. This is one of my favorite cards. If I can just yes. So
yeah,
because it shows the things that you're focused on. The two is love God, love people. The seven is authority, authenticity, appreciation, approachability, advancement, ask, and aim. And then the six is make, mobilize, multiply, model, mentor, magnify. Like everybody knows, like this is who
yeah,
we are. This is where we're going. This is what we're all about. And I
right.
love how you've done that. And I think that's part of the thing that's really made you stand out as a leader is that just being able to like paint that vision and then put it in motion.
Yeah, to put it in motion. And then, kind of the beauty of the 276 is that that is the address of our church, and to be able to illustrate it, that
Yes.
what we're really trying to say is, at the gathering of believers of the church that meets together
Yeah.
physically at 276 East Hunley, this is what it is that we're focused on.
Hmm.
And we know that you can do it in different places, in different
Hmm.
locations, but casting the vision that this is specific to us, to the people that have gathered
Yeah.
here. And again, that makes things, to move from this general view to something specific for the gatherers of people who come there.
Yeah.
This is it, and
Yeah.
I'll tell you where I got that from, Bruce. Is I was walking across the street from the middle school. I'd led a FCA group one morning, and I was walking over, and my eyes just
Mm.
fixed on the numbers on the outside of our building. And I mean, again, we're saying this to all of your listeners who they're not as familiar as we are towards our own landscape, but we got a church directly next door to us.
Hmm.
We're in our small, community, but we still got, churches. What's significant about separating this church? Like, what's
Yeah.
distinctive about our church? 276. And so
Yeah.
that's where a lot of that came from,
Yeah.
was for me to just kind of like dig down.
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
I love all this. And I'm right now, I'm writing another book. And I hadn't planned on writing a book, but it's different. And that's why I'm calling it A Different Lane. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's what Lakeshore is moving into, a different lane. And there's these things that you have to do to get in that different lane. There's things that apply. But I want to ask you this question. This is the question I've asked you about church attendance before. I've asked you about different things, but this kind of wraps it all up. And that is this. How does someone like you or the church family, how do you define success? I think that's one of the things that when you come in, you're trying to find your lane and now you own it and now you're expanding it and doing all these different things and you'll continue to multiply. But how do you define it? Like, because what if you don't have a lot of people show up, but yet you're leading people to Christ? Or I'm just curious, in your view, what does success
Yeah.
look like at Lakeshore?
Man, you know what? When I was planning the church in New York, and you're talking about some high stakes in a way
Mm,
in New York because we were so dependent on support, on outside support. You know,
okay.
we had significant partners, predominantly from Texas, by the way, who, you know, they're investing money. I mean, they're investing like real money to help get these
Hmm.
churches started. So, man, I wake up like you're feeling the pressure. I mean, it's not just like you hope somebody comes to the church
Mm,
today. You're at the point of like, how do you this thing's got to succeed. We got to get
mm,
this thing off the ground.
hmm.
And there's, you know, you're starting with not a lot, you know. We're just especially we started the second church on it was in East Islip, New York. It's about maybe 50 miles east of Manhattan. And we're starting from scratch. We got me and Jenna, we got these two other families. We're just starting this church. And I had a significant investment from a church. And I mention those things because you are always trying to define success. You're always
Mm.
trying to define like at least we're making progress, right? And so what are we looking at to make some progress? Or is the needle moving at all?
Yeah.
And anyway, along the way, I read this book by a guy named Brian Bloy, and Brian Bloy wrote this book called "It's Personal."
Hmm.
And the way that he ended up defining it is that he says, here's the hard part about leading a church. If it blows up and it fails, it's all on you. You drop the ball. If it succeeds, you don't get any credit either. It's all glory to God. So you're
Hmm.
kind of living in this tension of like you want to like define success,
Hmm.
but you know the way that we're talking about it in church, you know, we want to be able to sit there and go, well, if it's working, then you know God is behind it, and that God is, you know, helping with it. If it fails, man, it must be the pastor's fault. And so I kind of have held on to that, and so that's part of my answer. The other part of it like probably more specifically and legitimately, is you're leading, but it just goes back to any other business. You got to sometimes look behind you. Is anybody following? Is anybody?
Mm.
I'm stepping out. Anybody behind? Anybody coming alongside? You know, anybody? You know, where we're able to, you know, determine that we're actually moving towards the goal. What makes that hard in church is because you want everybody to be in agreement, but you can't base it on. It's not necessarily a democracy. That's I know that sounds really kind of controversial, but you can't just go with the wind, just where everybody's just kind of like, yeah, let's do that. There's got to be like, no, we're following this vision. This is where we're going, and you want to see like, are people coming along? Are they following that vision? And so
Mm.
sometimes, you know, you've got to be willing to go out there, and whether or not people are in agreement is not the complete determination of whether or not you're, you know, successful. Sometimes you got to like take a risk. You know, what we would call like a replant. We replanted a church in Brooklyn, a church in Brooklyn down to 9 people. This church building was established in 1869. They have a beautiful stained glass window at the very back of the building. Big building, wraparound balcony, pipe organ. The stained glass says in memoriam of William McKinley. Like President McKinley is like associated with this church. They're down to 9 people, and this church votes 7-2
Hmm.
to bring me on as the pastor, to pay me zero, to pay me nothing. And so, the first like three times I preached at this church, they like 30 people are sitting on the very back row, arms crossed, it's total scrutiny. I'm just kind of realizing that, man, we're not gonna just rely. This is not gonna be our leadership. This is not gonna be our leadership team. Do you know what I did, Bruce? I had friends. Jen and I had friends in New York City when they brought us on to become the pastor. I got enlisted some friends. We had 21 people join the church the day that we became the pastor. Like our friends, like they came on and they said,
Okay.
we're going with you. We're going with you in this. And if you can just imagine that instantly changes
Mm,
the trajectory
yeah.
of where we're going, because
Yeah.
everybody's looking within. And now you've got like this vision of like, oh, we're not looking within. There's
Yeah.
other factors that were here. So we've been there for just a few months, and Halloween was coming up,
Mm,
and I said, well, there's a great opportunity for us to reach out to our community. I mean, again, this is Brooklyn. This is the Park Slope neighborhood of Brooklyn, Fifth Avenue, 12th Street. And so they said, no, no, no. On Halloween, we turn off the lights
mm,
early in the day. We don't associate with Halloween. And I said, no, we're gonna reach out to our community. And they said, no, if we're gonna do anything, everybody's got to wear like biblical costumes and come up to the church.
mm,
I said, no, 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 we're gonna do this. And I had me and
mm,
Jenna, these 21 other people. We pulled around a barbecue grill. We made hot coffee. We had loads of candy and
mm,
coffee to pass out. I told everybody on the team, here's all we're trying to do.
mm.
Memorize somebody's name. Just meet somebody where you go,
Yeah.
man, I know their name. We had 150 people that came to that event. Over the next 6 months, 60 of those people that we met at that ended up coming to our church.
How about that?
And again, I share that because like, do I put that into the success category? I do, because it's not just with the church, but I'm saying these other 21 people caught the vision of what it is
Mm,
that we were trying to do, and they said, okay, now we can go from here. So it doesn't have to be everybody, and churches are tricky because you do want unity, you want everybody to go. But when you're looking at it, that's why you got to almost start. It's why you got to almost start with the vision. You got to go,
hmm.
this is where I'm headed. This is
Yeah.
where I'm leading the church. And you got to do that with some care. You've got some gentleness in the conversations.
Mm,
You're going to get some pushback, and and the way that I look at, I'm still their pastor. The people who disagree with me, at the end of the day, I'm still their pastor. I've still got a role to play. I'm still to shepherd them. So, it's not necessarily a my way or the highway attitude, as much as it is that gently you're saying out of conviction, this is where I'm headed. This is where we're going, which is a big part of, I mean, of why we've spelled out, where our church is.
yeah.
Again, we're coming back to that word. We're determined.
Yeah.
This is where we're going.
I love that. I love that story. That's such a relatable. Everybody can like see that, and I appreciate you sharing that. Man, I told you time would fly. We're kind of getting
Yeah.
up to the end of the
Okay.
show here. I do want to ask you a couple of questions before we get to It's Time to Accelerate. And that is this: were you ever given any advice that it was just so good that you find yourself sharing with others? But I also want you to share in conjunction with that. I don't know, maybe why people need to find a church home. Why it's important? Because I think we've seen, I don't know if it's a decline today, it's probably more of a plateau, but it's been a decline over the years as far as people actually going to church. And I'm just curious, like, were you ever given any advice around that? And or how, what would you share as advice to the importance of people being part of a community?
Yes, I draw on a lot of it. That's you talk about the reflection. I grew up, like you said, I grew up in house where my dad was a pastor of different churches in Houston area.
Hmm.
My dad was an example of somebody who just he just loved people.
Mm.
My
I love
dad,
that.
the best example that he set for me was his love for people.
Hmm.
And so my dad passed away. My dad passed away
Hmm.
almost 4 years ago now.
Hmm.
But my dad was a pastor and a preacher. But before any of that ever happened, my grandfather owned a plumbing company in Houston. So my grandfather, my dad, my uncles, my aunt, everybody worked for the plumbing company. Everybody did. And so the way that my dad really exemplified for me what it means to be a pastor was he would roll up his sleeves and somebody
Yeah,
had a need in the church.
love it.
He can meet the need through plumbing as much as he can meet the need from somebody coming in,
Mm.
to his office to talk to him. He put those things on almost like on a equal value. It's not trying to necessarily always get people to move in the direction that I told them to go. We told you we want you to come to church. We want you to do this. A lot of times it's going to them. And again, we see this in our community. We love people. People got to know that. I really believe this, Bruce. People have to know that we love them
Mm.
many times before they can ever hear the message that God loves them.
Mm. I
It's
love
one of
that.
those things to just kind of go with God loves you. It sounds good. We understand that
Hmm.
that's like the right answer for a lot of people who are cynical and skeptical, much like most of the people that I met in New York. So, in order to convince a New Yorker that God loves them, 100% of the time, it felt like they had to know that I loved them, that I cared about them. Once that begins to happen, then you begin to like see that becomes contagious within a church, and that's and it's not a. I mean, full disclosure, this is what we're seeing happening in our church right now.
Hmm.
There's a contagiousness. I mean, you were there Sunday, and you were leading our welcome and hosting our service, but you can kind of tell this. The service is over. We concluded it. We had a closing prayer, and you can see from the congregation that people are sticking around. That you see
Yeah.
the interaction. The service has been over, for 20 minutes. The
Mm.
interaction, the connection of the community, continues on. That's kind of how that you want to be a part of that. And for
Yeah. I
sure,
love
man, I
that.
understand the importance of a
Yeah.
message and
Yeah.
all of that. But that would be my encouragement. That's
Love
kind of
that.
how we see it.
I love that. When you were sharing that just now, I was thinking about Lou Holtz. He just passed away.
Right.
And in one of his books, he talked about, when people come up to you, they want to know these three things. They want to know, do I trust you? Do you care? And can you help me?
Yeah.
And I think that's just the same way what you were talking about. John Maxwell always talks about, his dad talking about how, hey, you need to value people, care about people, and love people.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about is like, hey, people need to feel that. And I feel like they do. I feel like you've done a wonderful job doing that. And man, I can't wait to see, what's ahead for Lakeshore. Hey, I want to ask you a few questions real quick on this
Sure.
time to accelerate. I do always like to ask leaders, like, do you have like a favorite book? Because you write a lot. We
Was
haven't
that?
even talked about that.
Just before the pandemic took place in 2020, a book came out called "Canoeing the Mountains"
Oh, yes,
from
you told me
Todd
about that.
Todd Bolsinger,
Yeah.
and just really talking about how basically just saying that way that we've conducted most of our leadership has been through a canoe and you've
Hmm.
been riding the river, but at some point, how do you navigate the mountains? This happened all right before COVID and that entire thing, and everybody had to rethink. Oh, this, how are we doing this? But I've held on to that quite a bit.
Yeah.
I've retained that quite a bit, used it quite a bit here. Canoeing the Mountains is one of my most favorite books. There's another book I've read it. Man, this has got to be 20 years ago. Searching for God Knows What by Donald Miller is
Hmm.
probably one of the
Okay.
other books that really resonated with me at just the right time concerning my own faith and how I began to just kind of change some of those things. But those are two
Okay.
big influences. I feel like I refer back to them on a regular basis.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Hey, I know you're a continuous learner. Like, what's something like you still want to learn?
I like that question too. It's so funny you ask that. I think that there's a lot of history.
Mm,
I feel myself a little bit more drawn to some of what you kind of know something on the surface. It's one of the things that I've really enjoyed about a lot of podcasts is
mm,
that you get a chance to kind of dive deeper. It moves
mm.
beyond just kind of the surface
Yeah.
information. I think my wife and my kids kind of think that I'm becoming a nerd in this way. But I've been watching different documentaries. Particularly, I love almost all of the Ken Burns
Yeah. Oh,
documentaries.
yeah.
And
So
there's probably
good.
not too much, but I've been watching the Civil War.
Mm,
He's got it. I mean, it's
yeah.
been around for a long time. Been watching the Civil War
Yeah.
documentary, and how much was going on. You kind of think this is what the Civil War was about. And, to a large degree, it was about slavery, but it wasn't just about slavery. And
Mm,
there was a lot, money, finances, ownership of,
mm,
not just, people, but property. And there's a lot that goes beyond that. So I find myself kind of drawn towards history, where I feel like I'm learning, or maybe some to some degree, relearning. My other favorite topic is the second half of life that I'm in. I'm re-examine certain things from, you got your first half of life to where this is what I was striving to be. I'm
mm,
trying to prove myself. Now that I'm here on the second half, a little bit more relaxed
mm.
and man, just getting to kind of enjoy the ride a little bit more without trying to prove myself as much.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a Falling Upward is a book by Richard Rohr. It's another one of my
Okay.
go-to books. But yeah,
It's good stuff. This is so good. You know, I wrote in one of my books, Great Leaders are Grateful Leaders. What are you grateful for?
really, I'm grateful for the moment that just goes right along with the
Yeah.
rest of what it is we're talking about.
Yeah.
I've used that goes with what I'm talking about with the first half of life and second half of life. Seems like for a long time I'm aspiring what's around the corner. Okay, if I could get to this point, then what? I, I really am taking a lot of deep breaths. I'm grateful for the moment.
Mm,
It's funny, Bruce. I mean, you didn't ask me this, but I read this passage this morning on this Bible reading plan. I don't always know exactly what to expect. I didn't know I was going to read this today, but I read this passage called Second Samuel chapter 7, verse 18. This is a verse that Jenna and I have this reference throughout our house. We've got this scripture reference throughout our house. It is tattooed on my arm. It's Second Samuel 7:18. Happened to read it today, just on my Bible reading plan. And it's David. And David is talking to God and it says, "Who am I and what is my family that you have brought me this far?" And Jen and
mm,
I started praying that prayer one day, and God has brought us to this place.
mm,
God has brought us, and it just it's made us in so many ways just appreciate the moment. It's not over. It's not over. We got a journey ahead. But who am I and what is my family? You brought us this far. You've sustained us, and so that's just kind of a way for us to just kind of keep that appreciation front
mm.
and center, without getting ahead, without getting carried away about tomorrow. But we can stay focused today.
I love that. I've got a full page of notes here, Sterling. This has been so. You shared that story just now, and like I got chills. That's so good. I love that. Now I'm going to go read that
Yeah.
and meditate on that. Hey, okay. Here's my last question. I've asked this question to over 250 leaders in the workplace, and I want to ask you as well. Sterling, 10 years older, is around the corner, and he's knocking
Mhm.
at the door, and you're going to go answer that door. What's he going to tell you?
I think he's gonna tell me that keep on keeping on.
Oh,
It's gonna be okay. Keep on keeping on. There's a road ahead. This is what I love about your leadership lane. There's a road ahead. Keep
yeah.
on going. Yeah, you're not there. You got to keep on going. I feel like I could do an entire thing about my dad, and
Mm,
he really truly has influenced me. But my dad would say this to people: plow all the way to the fence, plow all the way to the fence, and whatever the stage of your life is, plow all the way to the fence. And he would say that even when he was coming to the end of his life. I'm gonna plow all the way to the fence. I'm gonna plow all the way to the fence, and it's the similar thing. Just the 10 years from now, I think that's what he would say. Keep plowing, keep on going, plow all the way to the fence. We got a journey ahead.
this is so good. I am so grateful for you coming on the show, sharing your wisdom, your perspective. Hey, there's somebody listening to the show and maybe they heard something that you shared and they want to learn more, or maybe they want to learn more about Lakeshore. How is the best way for somebody to connect with you?
Yeah, I think email is good. My email is sterling at lsbc.life, and would love that. Would love to connect with anybody.
Yeah, and if you when you reach out to Sterling, be sure and let him know, hey, I heard you on Life in the Leadership Lane. Here's what you shared, and it makes that connection just so much richer. And so again, I appreciate you. I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate everything you're doing for Lakeshore. And again, I can't wait to see what's ahead, and I can't wait to share this conversation.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
All right, I'll talk to you later.